You're my favorite person.
Not sexy.
God damn it.
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noelle.
Hi, welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
And I'm Amber.
And today we are talking about Julia Quinn's book from the Bridgerton universe.
This was Noelle's first time experiencing, or is your first time jumping into this?
Yeah, I definitely got my Bridgerton cherry popped.
So I have read The Duke and I, which is the first book, and I read the second book, and then this is the fourth book. But we went ahead and read this because this will be the next series on Netflix. It will be based on this one. Do we want to talk about the author a little bit?
Yes, why don't you take it away? Because I know very little, or I know nothing of her, knew nothing going into it, and I still know very little.
The author is Julia Quinn, and she wrote the first book, The Duke and I, in 2000, which I think out of the three I've read, the first one is probably my favorite. But she said she was inspired to become a writer during her senior year at Harvard. She was eating a tub of ice cream and reading a romance novel, and she was trying to figure out during her senior year, you know, what does she want to do? And so she thought maybe she would like be a doctor and go to medical school. And so she kind of was planning on doing that. She was like, how am I going to have a full-time job and be in medical school? And so she's kind of thinking about all this while she's eating her ice cream, reading the romance novel, and she thought, I'll just write a book. I'll write a romance novel too instead of working full-time, and that's how I'll make money. And so that's why she started writing. And I don't know that book ended up being The Duke and I or not, but The Duke and I was just her first published book. So she ended up doing that, and then she, put out all of these books, and she said she's taking like physics and organic chemistry and then writing these, romance novels. But she said what happened was she was sitting at Starbucks and she was writing, and at that point she had already published. Like, she had all these Bridgerton books published. I think there's 8 or 10 of them. There's a bunch. And her agent calls her and said that Shonda Rhimes, and so Shonda Rhimes, she produces and writes like Grey's Anatomy, Private Practice, How to Get Away with Murder. And so Shonda Rhimes was on vacation and ran out of reading material, stumbled upon one of the Bridgerton books, read it, and was like, I want to make this into a show. So she contacted them, and so Julia Quinn, like, she hadn't been trying to make that she didn't contact Shonda Rhimes. She wasn't,
right
after Netflix or anything. So she's like, it was a complete shock. And then when they made it, all her sales just skyrocketed because the first book was published in 2000.
Oh, wow. That's what my next question was going to be, like, how long has she been writing?
Right. And I don't know if that was like her first book ever, but that was the first book in the Bridgerton series. That's like 20 years has gone by, and then it becomes this massive hit. And so not what she was expecting, but that's kind of the story of how she decided to become a writer, and then how she got picked up by Shonda Rhimes and Netflix.
That's interesting. It's always funny to me how many, successful books or series or just successful projects come out of people being like, yeah, I was just trying to make some money.
There's so many that work and work and work, and then it never happens. And that's why, because they hear stories like this, and it's so encouraging.
Yeah, so the band, The Offspring, the lead singer was in medical school and started the band, and then got really famous, got really lucky being in that weird time of the 90s where you could have a band like The Offspring and it paid for his medical school.
So did he become a doctor?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that much. I just know that that he was in medical school when he started the band to pay his school bills. So, and I know what's the book set in the South during the Civil War? It's Gone with the Wind. Was written during the Great Depression because she was like, I need some money, and she just wrote this romance book. So maybe it works. Maybe we should just write Smut.
So did you make anything? I know you've been on vacation. Did you come up with a recipe?
I didn't. Will you forgive me? Or can I do like a part 2? I think what I want to do is make like one of those little tea sandwiches that they had at all the dances. Really, it seems like they all have these like little tea sandwiches. So that will be out. I'll have that done by tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think they do tea time a lot, and they talk a lot about Colin, and he's always eating the sandwiches, and so
Yeah.
I think, or the butter.
I did that.
biscuits.
That was kind of my favorite quality about Colin. I didn't find him incredibly likable, but I loved that as soon as he would like be at someone's house, he'd say, "Where's the food? Did you tell him to bring food?" And they're like, "Of course, Master Colin." And they bring him like a giant plate of his own sandwiches. Let's talk about the cast of characters, and then we can get into spoilers.
Okay.
I imagine the only people listening to this episode have read it, or they're,
Familiar. They've probably watched the shows at least.
Yeah.
A lot of people have watched the shows.
So the characters from the Bridgerton universe, I kind of want to just like keep saying that, that are in this book is the Bridgerton family: Eloise, Colin, the older sister,
Daphne,
the youngest sister,
Hyacinth,
the older brother.
Anthony. So there's 2 older brothers, and Anthony took over like the family stuff. He's the oldest because their dad had passed away, so he's in charge of the businesses and the real estate and all of that. And then the second brother, so their names are alphabetical, so I want to say the second one's Benedict. He's a painter. And then Colin is the third one, and that he's the main male love interest of this. And then Daphne, and she was the main love interest in The Duke and I. And then Eloise. That was another big difference. If you haven't read this one yet, and the series isn't out yet, but Eloise's story in the second season on Netflix is very different than
She's not a
what happens
spinster?
in this book. They're neither. So in this book, Daphne and Penelope are like in their they're like 28, but they're not in the shows. But it's season 2, so I don't know about season 3. But it's just her story is very different. She's kind of talking to someone and stuff, and that's when she's like still in her season. Yeah, they changed it.
Sometimes they do that just to make the stories more interesting, or to give other characters a little bit more spotlight, because Eloise didn't get a lot of story time.
Each book is based on a sibling, and so this one was based on Colin, and so that's why Eloise she's not a main character of this one.
Penelope's family is the Feather Wings. What are the Featheringtons?
She has 2 older sisters, but they already got married.
Oh, okay. So they weren't
the
featured.
Show, there's not a younger sister, but I was reading up, and I guess that initially the younger sister was there, like in season 1, and then that girl had to leave because she got another job, and so season 2 she wasn't in, but in season 3 they recast her, so she'll be back.
Her sisters are Prudence and Philippa. Portia is her mother. She's the worst. Hated her. Worst character. Terrible mother. Terrible person.
The shows, I think I would have liked this book better if I hadn't seen the shows. But in the second season, their family actually goes through quite a lot, and because the dad is still there, and then they go through a lot, and the mom has like a much bigger storyline.
I feel like the book really, or Julia Quinn's writing style, made Penelope Featherington sound so ugly, so homely, that I had a hard time. I had to, in my mind, try to imagine her being beautiful in her own way and not like an ogre. the way that she was described in the book.
I will say, out of the 3 books, this was definitely my least favorite. If I had read this one first, I probably wouldn't have read the other ones. I felt like a lot of it was super redundant, like him always eating and her always being on the outskirts of the party, and there were just things that they kept repeating over and over and over, and it was really annoying. And then there wasn't really, so like in the other books, there's all this like sexual tension, and you're like, you know, it's like enemies to lovers, and it's, you know, all of this stuff. Well, in this one, he's known her forever, and he's just all of a sudden like, oh, she's not ugly, you know. It's
right.
It's like, I feel like she tried to make happen what people fantasize happening, you know, like
she's all that
in love with the guy. Yeah. And it just didn't work for me, and because I've seen the shows. And in the shows, Colin falls in love with someone. There's another girl. And he gets his heart broke. And there's this whole thing. And meanwhile, she's friends with him that whole time. You know, so it's like, but he's not attracted to her at all.
Interesting.
So yeah, I felt like it was really forced. I was not a fan. And I thought a lot of it was pretty predictable. The first 2 books were so much better. You want to like delve into the Bridgerton series, I would say read the first 2 or one of the first 2. You could probably just skip this one.
I wouldn't read it again.
Yeah. What did you think about like the format, because you don't really read romance, and so I know a lot of people have this idea with a romance novel, it's all sex and steam, and like, you know, I think there was a one sex scene.
I have to say one thing about the writing. I think that she used the words simply and rather so much that it was starting to like make me twitch. Everything was simply lovely, rather tired, simply elegant, rather terrible, simply magical, rather wonderful. I was like, oh!
I didn't notice that so much as just like, oh, Colin's hungry again. Like, oh, you better get him food. Oh, Colin's hungry. It's like that was his only personality trait.
Or Colin's walking again, and it's gonna rain. Like every time he's like, you know, I'm going for a walk. It's like, Colin, we know your luck. It's gonna rain. Darn it! It rained.
Yeah, imagine in London. I was just really disappointed because I really liked the first 2. Like, I liked the first 2 books much better than I liked the shows they did on them. But I liked the shows better than I liked this book. Like, when I watched the shows, I was like, the books were so much better. But this book I disliked to the point that I thought the shows were better than I'd rather watch the shows than read this book. And it's weird because the other ones, it's the same writer, it's the same family, it's the same characters. Like, I think she was just trying to force it. Like, I would like to ask her, like, what was going on at that time? Like, did they, because this was the 4th book, and so it's like, were they, I know, like, friends of mine who are published, you know, they'll like give them these deadlines and they'll push, and so they're rushed.
I'm wondering, did she have an editor who said, hey, let's talk about Penelope Featherington. She's interesting, right? How can we get her involved? And she's like, I don't know. She has no romantic interests. And then they're like, how about Colin? He's nice enough. Penelope was interesting. She was smart. I loved that when we meet her at the beginning, she was kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to get married because I kind of fell in love. It's not going to happen. And I don't really want it. I don't really need it. I have a vibrant intellectual life.
I will say that I thought one of the issues addressed that she did well was Colin realizing that he was actually jealous of her success.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, so I was glad she included that in there. I thought that was done pretty well.
Well, it's kind of like when you hear about celebrity couples that break up because one's career is doing really well and one's not. They say that usually if it's the woman in the relationship with the successful career and the husband is struggling, that marriage won't last. But if it's vice versa, it has a higher chance of lasting.
That thing in men, that like DNA thing that they need to be the provider and take care of, you know, a woman. And luckily that's how my husband feels, and I feel like I like being taken care of, so it works.
I want to be taken care of. I'm like, hey, can you just, I don't know, take care of me? And he's like, no, I can't. 50-50, babe. I'm like,
well, I'm
okay.
like, I try, but you know, the career path I chose and stuff, just not a high-paying career path. And so I work. I just don't make very much money. Like, I can just, like, sit home all day. I could, but I feel like that would cause some issues.
Well, I feel like what we're talking about right now is so relevant to, like, the next book.
Yes. I have started reading that, and oh my gosh, yes, like, I can't wait to talk about that one. The next book is Night Bitch, and so if you want to start reading that one, and it's only 238-ish pages.
Yep.
But if you've ever been a stay-at-home mom, that book just, it's got that aspect and then like some weird stuff. But I think she really encompasses that. But yeah, so I was a little disappointed because this was the first true historical romance that I got Noelle to read, and I've read other ones I would have liked better. And I love Julia Quinn. I love the other two books I read, so I hate to give anything a negative, but it could just also be because Noelle's been having me read all these literary books, and so I may be like, you've ruined my brain.
Oh no. I think all of it can exist in one person, an appreciation for highbrow and lowbrow and literary and genre. It's just, I think sometimes there's a good story and there's good writing, and then sometimes there's not. And you can have a good story and bad writing, and you can have a meh story but great writing, and one can carry it. But in this case, it just kind of seems like neither the story nor the writing could carry it on its own.
Yeah, and so I'm glad I read the other two, or else if I had read this one first, I wouldn't have got like the hoopla around Bridgerton. But what did you think about there being like only one like big sex scene? Like it would say, oh, you know, like, and then they like went and had sex or whatever, but there only being like one where it was descriptive. Like, did that surprise you? Because before I ever read any kind of romance novels or historical romance, I thought that's just like all it was. Like it was just pornography on the page, but it's not.
Yeah, no, I liked actually kind of like more of their almost having sex scenes. I thought that they were pretty like heated, and it was also. There were times where with the wording, I wasn't sure. Sometimes she would describe in the scene, like, he took her in his mouth. And I had to be like, I think that she's talking about a breast. It's gotta be, right? But it didn't say it. And so I would like, I must have reread those sex scenes a couple of times to figure out what body parts were which.
What is that? What are you talking about? That's why the other two had a lot more of like the tension and the high stakes and that kind of stuff. This one didn't, and the other ones probably actually had more sex scenes too, but I can't remember if it was just that there was more like close calls or if there was actually more or not.
I think it was funny that Penelope was like bucking. She was like bucking violently, like bucking him off the bed, bucking him up against the carriage door. And I'm just picturing her because they're also telling us that she's a big girl. And I was like, this is not sexy. Like,
You got anything else to say on this book?
No, I wish I had more, and it might just be my week that was supposed to be magical and was a nightmare, and I'm in a weird mood. Like, I'm sad. I'm in this, like, sad bubble, and so I'm having a hard time being creative and having, like, excellent thoughts.
I'm in a dark place, man.
And it's not a dark place. It's just very overcast. Yeah.
The next book we're reading will not help with that.
Nice. I've been writing a lot in the margins and like marking pages because I'm drawing. I have some theories about the metaphor.
It's a metaphor?
Yes.
What the hell?
My aunt Linda, she follows our podcast. She lives in Maine. She bought the Bridgerton book. So when I saw her in Massachusetts this past weekend, she's like, I couldn't do it. I read 5 pages and I couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, I'm so sorry. She picks the worst book. She read Eileen. She said it traumatized her. And then she tried reading this one and she's like, I promise you, it'll get better.
It's like Twilight, right? So Twilight sold so many copies, was really popular, and I read it and I really liked it, but all these people were saying that she was such a bad writer, and I was like, why is it badly written? I don't get it. I don't see it. Well, then I spent like years like studying writing and different things about writing, and I went back and I was doing the audiobook and I was like, oh, okay, I get what they were saying. Learning about writing really does ruin the reading experience a lot of times because you're looking at the writing. But if you just love to read, and especially something that's like kind of a quick read and an easy read, and something maybe you want to do an audio version so you can be, mowing the lawn while you're listening to it, and it's nothing you're gonna have to really focus on or pick up on metaphors, then it's like good for that. Plus you have to like historical romance to like it.
It's okay. We'll just take nice pauses in between speaking and then see how awkward it looks.
Books and Brunch with Amber and Noel.